Hello, my name is Andrew Tripota. Welcome to the Imperfect Union Podcast, a podcast that seeks to better understand American community. Specifically, I talk to guests about what it is, if anything at all, and what, again, if anything, do we owe each other as members of this community. Today, I'm going to talk with pen name Kaiser. I almost said his real name. Kaiser wrote a book recently under the pen name that I just said of the great German emperors. It's called Tolerance, The Return of Christ. And it's a true story about his experience as a fighter pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2005. And being gay during that period. So this is the period of don't ask, don't tell. And he actually came out when he was in the military, is now out of the military after much fuss, as you can imagine, and is a water polo coach. I know him because we coach water polo together. So it's an interview on his experiences, his reflections on what it's like to be gay in the United States and in the military, and what the experience of being gay says about the dominant culture in this country. So it is his reflections are directly relevant to what it means to be an American, and what it means to be a member of this large, amorphous, dysfunctional, sometimes oppressive community. Hope you enjoy listening. I just wanted you to start by kind of giving an overview of the book, like, a 2-minute summary and like rationale for writing it and the reason that you wanted to write it in the first place. You wrote a book recently called Tolerance, The Return of Christ. You wrote it under a pen name, and it's autobiographical, and it's really an incredible story. So I want to hear like why, just briefly, and then we can get into some of the specifics.
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is that I actually kind of never really planned on writing it. I was writing in the years before, I was writing in journals, and it almost, like, looking back, it felt like it was kind of like practice, I think, because my journal entries were like very similar to how my writing style ended up being in the book. There was something I wrote in the original draft that was like, I never read Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville, but I know the story is like, it's basically democracy, or it's a journey around, so it's a journey around America through the eyes of a Frenchman. So one of the things I kind of wrote, I think I added it into the new version, is like, I kind of think what I wrote was sort of along those lines of like, what is a journey around America through the eyes of a young gay kid who grows up in the country and then essentially like goes to the military, goes to war in the Middle East, and then, just learns about all sorts of different things that he had learned in school, but like then from a practical side, thinking of, gosh, going to jail, I think, like, it opens up, like, not many people get that experience.
Yeah.
And not many people that we really are willing to listen to. Like, once you go to jail or you spend time in prison, people don't really listen to you so much anymore. So it's like the very people, and then the same deal with, like, writing about what it's like growing up gay. We have a problem that, like, the very people we're not really listening to right now are gay people. Like, we're trying to say, no, it's not a sin. We're listening to the non-gay people, because once you're gay, you're like sort of second class. And so we don't really listen. So I think that was like, so the story, to be honest, I literally feel like it kind of wrote itself. And I say that because, like, it just did. I literally wrote, I think, almost 100 pages within like a week or two.
Damn.
It just like flowed naturally. Like, it didn't feel like it was work. Like, I imagine, I've never written something, I've never written anything, but I can't even imagine like how you put the story together of like a Harry Potter and you figure out like the story arc and everything. none of that. I didn't do any of it. It just sort of happened, and it was like, just sort of me writing as I was going through this whole journey. And once I got to jail, then it was writing about, here, I've never been in jail before. This is weird. I've never been in solitary confinement. People are talking about solitary confinement's really bad. Now I can talk about, like, holy crap, after 2 weeks, I was like ready to kill myself. Like, it's that bad. Like, it's torture. And then you go into the side of, like, all that training we had. I think that, to me, is the thing. Man, the Air Force training was insane. So then you add on, you take this training that, like, we get as pilots in the Air Force and apply that to, like, this experience. And can I talk about all these different things from that lens of, like, being somebody who is trained, like, by my own government, and then here's what I'm seeing. That I guess is the best way to explain it.
No, you just hit on a lot of the key themes and, like, I think most powerful parts of the book. And I think that comparison is particularly telling, because throughout the book, there's this feeling, first of all, agree that it is a journal. It's an intimate writing style, right? Like, you're sharing your personality and your voice in throughout. And you get the sense that it is the account of a foreigner in a strange land, right? I mean, you're an American, right? Yeah. But you feel at odds with American culture. And you feel like you're almost reporting from the inside of, like, the enemy,
Kind of, yeah. I actually kind of felt like that, because I was in journalism class in high school. I never planned it, but there's something kind of cool. The thought of, like, well, I'm going to go into into the inside and see what it's like. I never thought that way. I didn't know that was what I was doing when I was, 18 and choosing going to the Air Force. Right. But then when I started writing about it, it very much felt that way. And I had to just sort of go back to my memory and remember everything.
Yeah. Okay. So you went from a high school kid in California, right? Yeah. A badass water polo player, like pretty good student, right? Lived a pretty good life up until then, right? And you went to West Point to play water polo.
Air Force Academy. Yeah.
Sorry. You went to the Air Force Academy to play water polo.
Yeah.
You were a recruit. Basically, the way you talk about it in the book is that you were pretty much convinced by this recruiter, right? Who just kept knocking on your door and just kept offering this amazing deal of, free college. Did you know that you were gay then? And did you know what the military's policy on being gay was?
Yeah, I mean, I knew enough. Like, I was, I would say 8th grade is probably when I started figuring out, okay, I'm having a problem with girls. Now I recognize, like, I want to hang out with that guy. But
What was this? Sorry, what year were you 18 going into Air Force?
No, I'm thinking like 8th grade is probably when I started figuring it out.
But still, like, what year are what timeline are we talking?
Time frame. I graduated in 98 from high school, so that would have been like 94, 93.
Okay.
Yeah. But you it's subconscious. Like, it's conscious, but it's subconscious. Like, it's like I'm going home and I'm looking at, like, that was, 92, 93 is to have internet at that time was like dial-up, AOL.
Right.
And so that's really early to be like, a 9th grader in 1993 and already like exploring, sort of like looking at pictures of guys on the internet. Like, so there's like this, it's conscious, but it's subconscious. So there's like, I knew, but I didn't know. I think I imagined having the conversation with my parents when I was in college was what I was planning. So I kind of pictured that when I was 20, I figured like sophomore year of college was what I was thinking. Like, that's when I'll come, say something.
So when you're this young kid, going through, just kind of realizing that you're attracted to men.
Yeah.
Even then you had a feeling that this wasn't an acceptable way of thinking? Like,
I think, let's keep going. What were you gonna say?
Like, did you tell anybody?
No. No, I don't think I ever said anything to anybody. Not until I just when I was 22, maybe. No, I never really acknowledged it.
Did you journal about it? You talk about how you journaled, You
I didn't
didn't.
journal until after. No, I didn't start journaling until I was like 25. So no, I never really said anything. I mean, I had my like friends I wanted to hang out with and stuff, and um, I don't want to get into anyone's, but you know, young high school guys are. It's okay to experiment a little bit, you know. So maybe, um, anyways, I don't want to get into that. But yeah, I mean, it was like it was a known, but it was an unknown. So then I had people who were like, when it came to the Air Force Academy, I had like, you know, teachers that I was talking to, gotten into Berkeley, which is like, man, I never thought I was going to get into Berkeley.
Yeah.
My sister went there. So I kind of had an idea of what that path looked like because, you know, my older sister had gone to Berkeley and I'd visit her and, you know, my brother went to Santa Barbara. My other sister went to Cal Poly. Like I knew those paths. And then, you know, so then I had this Air Force thing and it was kind of like I was having these teachers who were like, man, that could be pretty cool. Like nobody does that. And so it was kind of, that was like, I kept thinking like, yeah, it's really weird. Like nobody really does that. And then I went to visit and it wasn't so bad. I was thinking this could be kind of interesting, you know? I don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
But,
in my mind, I don't know that much about either Berkeley or the Air Force Academy, but it's hard to imagine just on my like stereotypical, very basic understandings of each. It's hard to imagine more opposite.
totally.
And you would have going from like smoking weed every day and talking about philosophy to waking up at 5 a.m. and like learning how to kill people with
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like when I told people, everyone was laughing about the decision. They're like, "Oh my god, you couldn't choose like two more opposites."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it was really weird. Again, it wasn't like planned that I was like, I'm gonna write a book about this later on. It was just like, and again, like, what I would say is like, there's probably my story wasn't interesting until I actually came out of the closet. It's like all this time that I'm in the military, like, you know, again, I'm not really acknowledging that I'm gay myself. So it wasn't until I finally said like, I'm gay, that like, you know, and I came out and like sort of looked back on my story and like, that's when suddenly there was like a story here. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't a story until I actually came out and acknowledged to myself, oh my God, I'm gay. Oh my God, I've been hiding it for 10 years. Like I didn't even recognize that, if that makes sense. I know it seems weird, but I was like hiding, but not knowingly.
Yeah. You think about how many other feelings and urges that people have and like desires that people have that get sublimated and oppressed for that in the same sort of a way because there's this understanding that that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So you might as well not even acknowledge it. You know, it's just interesting to think of how perceptions of the dominant culture can oppress people in ways that they're not even being oppressed. Or they don't even
weird. Yeah.
oppressed. Yeah.
It's super weird because you go back and you think of like, I remember seeing Aladdin in Disney, you know, and like every Disney movie, there was always a boy, like, you know, and always a girl. And you're going through, you're like third and fourth and fifth grade, like nobody's told you anything about like, this is how you have to be. But you're seeing these images and like, you're kind of going like third and fourth grade, like, I don't know, like, what's that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so all through the Air Force Academy, you hadn't even acknowledged to yourself that you were gay.
No, not really. No, I mean, I would shop online for Speedos. It was the closest I could get with the firewall.
That is so good.
Shopping online for Speedos and underwear was about as close as I could get to like looking at porn.
Wow. I mean, Mazel Tov being so creative, you know?
I mean, everybody else was shopping for women's underwear probably, or like, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, firewall.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you have this inkling that you're different. You have this inkling, you know that you're attracted to men, but you don't really acknowledge that I am gay throughout the Air Force Academy. Then you go to war.
Yeah.
Right. So you graduate from the Air Force Academy, and then you go directly to...
It's like training. Yeah. Directly to training. Is that what you asked? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it took like 3 years post-graduation. So it was like 3 years of training through all the different, which is basically why it was like Pensacola, Oklahoma, Georgia, Arizona, and then my first station was Italy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 25 then by the time you finish training and you're going to Afghanistan.
Yeah. So once I got to Italy, I was there for about a year. Again, it's still training. You start out as a wingman, and then you go through the training and you become a flight lead. So I became a flight lead within a year, which was kind of a big deal actually that I got it within a year. And then part of the reason I did it so quick was because we were going to Iraq a year later. So it was 2006, I think, if I remember the exact. Yeah, 2006, 2007.
So total training, starting from when you join the Air Force Academy until you finally go into combat. How many years does that wind up being?
From about 4 or 5 years. I mean, and it never stops. So even though you become like a fighter pilot, the training never really stops.
Yeah. Okay.
You're always sort of training basically. But yeah, that's your job, is like training fly. But in terms of the school, it's like 3 years of flight school to have 16s, and then you get to your first base, but they're still training you as soon as you can. So,
and that's all after the Air Force Academy?
That's all after the Air Force Academy. Yeah, there's no flying at the Air Force Academy, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it all starts afterwards.
So it's 7 or 8 years. It's almost like a doctor.
Yeah,
training.
Yeah. A lot of, and it's not just like, what I say is it's not just flying training. Like, I mean, the amount of like academic classes you're going through and like having to learn about systems and airplane systems, and I never knew about an airplane engine. Like, there's so many things that you learn. There's like water survival, there's prisoner of war camp and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a ton of like all over the country. Like going to Washington for prisoner of war training, there was water survival, back in Florida. There's stuff everywhere. So yeah, it's a crazy amount of training and education.
Yeah. Okay. So you go through 7, 8 years of this type of intensive training.
Yeah.
And you go then eventually to the Middle East. And still at this point, you don't know that you're gay?
I knew, I knew a little bit. Yeah. There was a joke on the military bases or on the bases that like, we called them TCNs, the third country nationals, were the people who like cleaned the bathrooms and stuff. And they tended to stay in the bathrooms like a little more than they should have been and like clean a little too closely. And I was like, I didn't do anything, but like I kind of wanted to hang out in the back. Like, I would go like see if they would clean close to me kind of thing. Yeah, so I knew. Yeah. And I lived in Italy, and there was like a I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was like the temptation. I was like always the one who was being tempted.
But you didn't have this psychologically. You didn't
psychologically. It's weird. It's like so subconscious.
So you weren't in your head like, I'm a gay man, not telling anybody that I'm gay.
Because you can't, like, I couldn't acknowledge it. I couldn't say I'm gay. I had to say like, oh, that's kind of a turn on. I'm straight, but that's kind of a turn on. Yeah. You had to say things like that. And
you would say that in front of other people though?
No.
Oh, okay.
Don't say that to anybody. But you have to acknowledge like, okay, so these guys who are in the bathrooms, this is a military base in Iraq, and they were obviously finding other people than me who were willing to do this kind of stuff. So I wasn't the only one, is what like, if you really like want to get in, if you really want to explore that kind of like idea, these guys who were they were like, I don't know where they're from, sometimes like Sri Lanka or something like that, but they were obviously finding other military guys who were like wanting to do stuff with them. Yeah. So yeah, but I wouldn't know. You don't say anything like that. Like, I think that guy's good looking. I don't think because once I really did kind of acknowledge it was like 3 months before I finally sent it to maybe a month or two before I finally wrote my commander. Because once I said it, it was like impossible to not like, to then hide it. Because now I'm acknowledging that I'm lying to everybody. That was what was really hard. And so I think it was like, I remember there was one day this is when I was in the base in Italy, and I remember this one day, it was like maybe a week before I wrote my commander, and that was the first time I finally said to myself, like, I'm gay. And like proudly, like I just was like, yeah, like, I'm gay. And I had this like spring in my step as I was walking around, you know.
Okay.
Like that was literally the only time, that was I think the first time I fully acknowledged it to myself, like without saying. I think maybe a week or two earlier than that, I had mentioned to a female wife, a friend of mine, a wife of one of my friends. I think she was the one, you know, the first time I said, I think I'm gay, kind of thing. We were like hanging out at a bar, and I was like, I think I'm gay, and he's really cute, you know. And she was like, oh my God, that's so funny, you know, like she was like, oh, he's cute, yeah. And
Yeah.
that was like 2 weeks, and then like a week later, I was like, you know, like I'm gay and happy about it. And then I just couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. Once
So,
you acknowledge it, it's really hard to hide. Unless you, I did know people who like were consciously hiding, like had boyfriends on the side or had, you know,
oh, okay.
lesbians. I did hear about that afterwards. I didn't know many people like that.
But do you think that even those people who had boyfriends on the side, do you think that they pulled something like what you did, where it's like, I'm not gay, but I like to fuck around with other guys? Or?
No, yeah. Though it turns out, I didn't know this at the time, but it turned out one of the guys that was on my on my water polo team at the academy, like was like had a boyfriend in his senior year at the academy. I didn't know, like, I didn't know at the time, like, obviously, I don't know what's different about, like, obviously that makes for him for having a way different experience than I did. Like, I kind of basically went, like, full on don't ask, don't tell. And in my opinion, you know, for me, in order to do the don't ask, don't tell, I basically had to lie to myself first. But if he was like, I don't know if like that, how that changed our experience, you know?
Yeah. And
I would have hard, what's that?
go ahead.
I just looking back, I think I would have had a really hard time like consciously hiding it like that, especially when you get into like fighter pilot training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to think about the complexity and like sophistication of your unconscious mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, because your unconscious mind is recognizing how hard it would be to hide once you acknowledge something to yourself, and so therefore not acknowledging it to yourself. But your unconscious knows what's going on, right? Like you have some inkling.
Yeah. For me, the moment that was like, it was when I got to Italy and for my second assignment. So I did one assignment at Aviano, which was in the U.S. Air Force. And then I got this exchange assignment in the Italian Air Force. And when it was like within the first 2 weeks of meeting my new like Italian commanders, they were nice guys. And I don't think they were intending this, but one of them, you know, said that comment. He's like, you must be having fun with all these girls as long as you're not gay. You aren't gay, are you? And like stared at me waiting, you know, there was two of them and they like are kind of looking at me waiting for an answer. And I don't know if everyone knows, but there's physical things that happen to you when you lie. Like you get flush in the face, you feel this kind of sweat in your palms, your heart rate goes up a little bit. So when I said no, it was, I mean, we're talking like a split second moment. I mean, this isn't like, you know, this literally happens over the course of 10 seconds, 20 seconds. But when I said no and felt this like, you know, all these little physical reactions in me of lying, that was like, oh, fuck, I am.
But that's how you knew?
That was my moment of going, it's no longer like a temptation or lust thing or sin or all these other things. That for me was the holy shit moment of, oh, fuck, I am. That was the interesting thing because like those things.
Your body knew it.
And my body knew it. Yeah, it was so weird.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it, but I don't think it probably doesn't come off in the story as like, as being the moment. Like that really was the moment of like, holy shit, like I just lied about it. And
I know it because I know what happens when I lie physically.
Yeah.
And that just happened to me. That's
I
how
remember feeling, yeah, I mean, it hadn't happened, that lie thing hadn't happened to me very often. It really only works with a yes and a no question. If I don't know if you know about it, but like it doesn't work so well if it's not a yes or no question. I remember when I was in high school, like and it also it needs to be like an authority figure. So it was when I was like a senior in high school, there was a cheating scandal at our school. course I cheated, and my principal asked me if I cheated, and I said no, and I felt all that. So I knew it, you know. So I knew what it felt like when I lied, and because I remember saying it to her, and I felt it, and then I don't remember having that issue again until like, you know, until that day.
Yeah.
Feeling that, yeah. But that was like a whole crap. Yeah, holy shit. All those things I was saying to myself are no longer true. No longer just this like, I like looking at guys online. It's no shit, I'm gay. But that was, and then I had 2 more years in the Italian Air Force. So like, I had to kind of like, again, like sort of, you know, bury it deep down and like try and not acknowledge it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you ever think?
Yeah, it was weird. That was a weird experience to have because, oh, I think he just froze.
Can you hear me? Dave? Oh, now you just froze. Dave. Dave.
All right, sorry. There's a Black Lives Matter protest going by your house.
Oh yeah. You want to take a break to participate?
No, it's small. It's like one truck with like a bunch of people around it. Not too bad. Yeah, so I don't remember where we were, but
just talking about how, I mean, I just think, again, that's just like such a fascinating and crazy thing to realize fully for the first time who you are, because you noticed the physical effects of you lying about it.
Yeah.
And you didn't know that you were lying about it until you noticed that you were sweating and your face got flush.
Yeah.
It's just
yeah, I remember like trying to laugh it off or something or hide it, but like I'd be curious if they knew at that moment because I don't know if my face would have gotten red or yeah.
Do you think that because of this whole ordeal and your reflections on it, you know, a book worth of reflections on it and so much other thinking that happened when you were journaling and just elsewhere, do you think that you're more in touch with your conscious mind than others? Like, do you think in other ways you're like more aware of when you're trying to hide something from yourself, or like, do you, because I imagine we all have this problem, not in the same magnitude as like, you know, not acknowledging or not really knowing that you're gay, but we all, our subconscious hides things from us that we don't think are acceptable.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're more aware on that level because of this, or?
So yeah, what I'm thinking is somebody told me that I was like really introspective, meaning I tend to be my own therapist in a sense, and I don't mean that to say like I don't know what a therapist would say, but I didn't have, so like when I was in Italy, I didn't have a TV, so which was a conscious decision, and I would sit outside a lot, and I was smoking a lot when I was in Italy, and I would sit outside. I had this great balcony. I had I had this amazing view with like a river right down below me and a little waterfall. And I would just sit out there drinking and having cigarettes for like hours at a time. And what do? You're not like talking to anybody. So it ends up being this time where you're thinking about a lot of stuff. And so, and I think if you add on like sort of this idea of like a pilot perspective, I don't know if I need to. You add on this idea of a pilot perspective, I tend to like analyze myself from a third person perspective.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's normal for people to do, but like, I think it, you know, when I listen to the things that people say, like, I don't know, other people who are in the closet or things like that, I think I have a better understanding, especially based on what I wrote. I think I've had a better understanding of what it's like being in the closet or what's going on because of all this time that I spent thinking about my own story and recognizing that I'm not the only one who's going through this. So it's my story, but like, when I was giving it out to some people as I was writing it, like I was hearing back a lot, like, oh my God, you wrote my life too.
Wow.
Yeah, which surprised me, or like it was what I was hoping, or to be honest, I don't even know if I was hoping it. I just was writing my story. And then it turned into people telling me like, oh my God, you wrote my life too. Like all those things, I was having the same problem. So but I think a lot of that does go back to me. Literally didn't have a TV for like, partly because like Italian TV isn't all that great. We didn't have a whole lot, it's not like you have like 100 channels of cable and stuff. So I just decided not to get a TV. So I was constantly reading. I was constantly going out and like, I would literally just sit in the piazza and like have a drink. I was kind of alone, especially when I was with the Italian Air Force. It was pretty lonely. Like I didn't have a whole lot of friends. So a lot of times it was literally just sitting in the piazza by myself, drinking, watching people, and trying to figure out like what's going on, what are they doing, what's their story, like, and sort of imagining. I don't know, I think there's all that time, and I would say it's a little, I don't know, I don't meditate, so my meditation is sitting outside and having a cigarette. I don't know what it's like for people who meditate, because meditation, I think you're supposed to like not really think about things, but what if you do kind of like actually sit there and think about stuff and analyze yourself, analyze your life from a third person perspective? How many people do that? I don't know. I've never really, I don't know if people do that or not. It seems like something we don't do.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah.
I wonder how much of a role not television, and now probably even more so our phones and the things on it like social media play in robbing us of the opportunity to self-reflect in a meaningful, protracted way, I haven't had a TV since I left my parents' place when I was 18. And, I waste time in other ways. But,
totally.
but I find it tremendously valuable because it does force you to sort of look at yourself a little bit harder.
Yeah.
For longer periods of time. Yeah. But I think that's a little bit different. Sorry, were you about to say something?
No, I was just, which I think goes to all that time that I was like thinking about myself from a third person perspective, was like why it became, when I did finally start writing, why it became so easy is because I had literally written this thing in my mind over the course of years. So it was like, it was easier. It just came out. Yeah. But yeah, you were going to say something.
What was I going to say? I'm sure it'll come back to me, but I want to kind of get to I want to put more of a finger on the context of the military here. So you're going through maybe the most intense period of self-reflection when you're in the military. You're an active duty member during the don't ask, don't tell era. Do you think that, you kind of already talked about what that was like being in the military during, like, knowing what the culture of the military was during that time. Based on what you know now about the military, do you think that don't ask, don't tell is repealed? Do you think that culture has changed very much? Like, do you think it's easier for someone now who is in your position to be more honest with themselves? Do you think the military culture, when it comes to homosexuality, is more accepting and more open?
It looks to me like it is, like, but you know, I read some things where I think I read recently a guy complaining that like he was like getting bullied and beat and stuff. I think the military is huge, so it tends to depend on like what branch are you talking about? Are you talking about Air Force versus Marines? Air Force is generally, I think, I think that we've always been better at like almost more progressive, even though like I say military is very like conservative. I think the Air Force in general versus the Marines would be like, you know, a lot more gung ho, and so I think it would be harder to be open there.
Okay.
Um, to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with what it's like in the military right now.
Yeah.
Other than what I read, I try to read as much as I can, but yeah.
And to what extent do you think, or did the culture in the military reflect American culture in general when you were in it? Did you feel a similar sort of pressure outside of the military and in it to not acknowledge who you were? You know, like
yeah, and it totally depends on where you are. Like, you know, coming from California, like Silicon Valley area, south of San Francisco, like we were pretty easy, open. It's not like it's where people from the Midwest are running to. You know, like I would see, you know, I just remember, I don't know, you talk to people in San Francisco, a lot of them aren't from San Francisco. They're not even from the South Bay, because if you gave them the South Bay, you don't necessarily need to go to San Francisco. You go like, you know, somewhere else, LA, or like, you know, but if you're in the Midwest, in a place where, you know, the South or the middle of the country where it's not acceptable to be gay, then San Francisco is the light at the end of the tunnel, you know? Like, it totally depends on where you are. And so everybody's having really different experiences because, like, you know, for us coming out of high school, like, for us, my class is apparently known as like the most gay class out of our high school. Like, a lot of people came out, which is cool, you know? I think once one person comes out, another person comes out, and it's sort of like, it's like a virus. It spreads because, not a bad thing, but because you go, it's not a bad thing. Hey, he is too, man, I wish, you know, like we were friends. Or it spreads because you start finding out like a lot of my close friends were gay, and that made me feel more comfortable about myself too. So, but if you're, I mean, I read all these things of kids in like, you know, grew up in the South or grew up in, I don't know, Texas or some place that's super not, you know, I generally say conservative, that's super not welcoming or okay with it. The experience they're living is so different and really scary. And so when you get into like, talk about suicide, like, yeah, I mean, that's like, it's totally, it's so much dependent on where you're born right now.
Yeah.
And the family into which you're born. And like, you know, I mean, it can come down to like one neighborhood versus another.
Yeah.
In terms of like whether you're going to be accepted and what that's going to be like for your life. Do you have to like escape, or do you have, you know, yeah. Or do you just like, I would say, you know, when you're young, I think one of the reasons I knew when I was so young was because, so we had this 5th grade teacher who was gay. I didn't know what it meant when I was in 5th grade, but like, as you go through 6th and 7th grade and you hear this word gay, like, oh, what does that mean? He lives with another guy? Oh, huh, that's interesting. Like, I didn't know that. That's allowed, or that's possible, because I'd like to live with it. You know, I mean, you start learning these things, but it's like only because if you have those exposure to that. If you don't have any of that exposure, then you kind of end up, you know, 18, you could end up 18 years old, no idea. You could end up 20 years old, no idea. You could end up 30 years old. The big thing for me was always, you know, in a lot of the debates I have with people is like, or my understanding of the situation versus others is like, you know, I'm at the stage where I spent like maybe a week or two at a gay hotel in Fort Lauderdale. And I ask a lot of questions like that end up being really interesting because I don't think a lot of these guys had ever really had. So there was like maybe 10, 15 of us in a hot tub, you know, just sitting there. And I asked the question, what was your coming out experience, or when did you come out? You know, because it's rare that you find somebody who is like, oh, I came out at 12 or 14. It's pretty rare. What you find is a lot more like 40 or 50 years old who had, you know, married with kids and then came out or then figured it out. Or so yeah, there's all these weird, everybody's story is different, but I think it's like one of the most interesting questions, and it turned into like this great, you know, conversation and this hot tub of everyone telling their stories. And and a lot of them had never really told this story before, you know, or I'd never had anybody like ask it like that. Like, what was your coming out story like? You know, and think of like, man, 30, 40 years old. And there were people who, there were old guys who had kids, who'd been married. And you're like, so then you ask the question, okay, have they, you know, like, were they like me? Were they gay from the time that they were 12? Yeah. But they did all these things that even they didn't recognize. You know?
Yeah.
And again, it's like this is, you know, 50-year-old. So a 50-year-old was born in 70s, right? So even then it's a little different lifestyle. It's like a completely different world than mine.
Yeah.
And it depends where you're growing up. So yeah, it's, the whole thing's so fucking complicated. Yeah.
Just the way, the way that cultural norms either enable or disable individual expression, right, and like flourishing, right? Because if you're fortunate, then your innate desires are consonant with the dominant culture.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you've got a tough road, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, it's a discriminating factor you can hide. It's not a skin color. It's something you can hide. And not only can you, like, you know, I think not only do they only just now make it so it's illegal to discriminate in the workplace, but the kids get kicked out of their families.
Yeah.
So your incentive to hide is really strong.
Yeah.
It could be nothing more than a parent, like, oh, just one comment from a parent, like watching the news, oh, these gays or these faggots, something like that, and could completely annihilate, you know, a kid who's going, oh man.
So what?
Yeah.
Why do you? I'm asking this, anticipating the answer, because it really is at the heart of your book, which is called Tolerance: The Return of Christ. So what is it about American culture, or this part of American culture, that is associated with the conservative political movement, right? Yeah. What is it about this part of our culture and this part of our politics that is so intolerant of homosexuality? Like, where do you think that's coming from, and why?
My best understanding is kind of going back to Reagan, which is why I end up writing mostly about like him, because I don't think you can talk about it without really acknowledging. And I didn't know about him. I was born in 1980. I was 8 years old when he was gone. You know, I had no idea Reagan was the way he was. But turns out in the 1970s, like when he was running, like he was extreme. I don't know if you're watching. I've been watching this Mrs. America on Hulu, which is like about what's her name? Phyllis. Anyway, she was a woman who was like very conservative, and she was like trying to get in politics and stuff. And even Reagan was even like pretty extreme for her, you know. So like, I didn't realize what he was like. And so I actually like really got into reading about him and studying and like, so I kind of look at like all the things that happened in the US. If you don't focus on what changed in 1980, then you can kind of miss like, then you can sort of miss like where we are right now. Because if you look back at 1980, like if you look at the baby boomer generation's like a huge generation. They were basically born in the 50s, turned 30 in the 1980s-ish, you know? So that's when you're turning 30. This is when you're getting into careers and your friends are getting into politics and your 20s are like this kind of after college period, you know? But your 30s are when you're like, I need to get serious about stuff. And so that's kind of what happens to an entire generation in the 1980s. And then like a Reagan arrives, you know, and he's super conservative, and he's saying that's when we have like the growth of the moral majority, which is I think Jerry Falwell and you know all those like religious groups like all kind of came together in the 80s surrounding Reagan, and so we have this huge movement starting in the 1980s, and I think that like you can't. I don't think looking at today without understanding that movement and that sort of rise of what, especially now with Trump, without looking at that, I think is kind of,
Yeah.
you end up missing a huge part of the story if you're only looking at today with Trump.
So much of what people talk about with Reagan, it's interesting that you say all that, because so much of what people talk about with Reagan is his economics, right? Trickle down, like Reaganomics, like he founded the conservative economic movement, or championed it really, and made it, kind of won that debate, at least for the time being. But you forget, or at least in modern times, it's much less emphasized his sort of moral piece, right? Like the morality of like his moral case, which is a conservative, very grounded in religious values and Christian values in particular, evangelical values, even more specifically. But it is worth, I mean, acknowledging that pre-Reagan, our country was not very tolerant of homosexuality, right? So, I mean,
nobody was. I mean, nobody really was.
really,
maybe Europe a little bit. There's been like pockets.
so what's going on? Like, why? Why are we like, as a human species? Why are we so recent?
You know, something that I thought was really interesting was, have you ever heard of the third spirit? It was, or three spirits. It was a Native American thing. Three spirits in Native America, like culture, were basically, they were sort of like LGBTs. They were either gay or they were trans. And they were celebrated. Yeah, if you Google it, you can find like three spirits. They talk about it. They were basically, they call them three spirits because they were like even better, because not only did they have, you know, they were even better because it wasn't, they weren't just man or woman. They were all three, you know, or like better. So there are like pockets of history, but then of course, you know, we came and we were Protestants, and so we like made them feel ashamed about the three spirit people. And so like, there's always been pockets, like, I mean, Roman times, it was more acceptable.
True, right? Greeks too, the Greeks famous.
Yeah, so there's always been these like pockets of like, but it seems like there's always also, I don't know why that we chose that one. I think a lot of it has to, okay, so I'm going to admit my favorite part of the book is when I talk about Moses and Leviticus.
Okay.
I think it's my favorite thing I ever wrote was that. I don't know if you remember it, but.
Oh, you want to jog?
What's that?
You want to jog my memory?
Yeah, I mean, basically talk about like, I said it starts with, I understand what Dietrich Bonhoeffer meant by temptation. And then I talk a little bit about, I don't know if it's in your version, but I said, I read the Quran in here, and I talk about the difference, how we're so much more willing to follow intolerance than we are to follow tolerance. You know, we will follow, you know, Ronald Reagan to the letter, but we don't really, it's hard to get us to follow Obama. We're doing okay. But maybe that's a bad example. The example I use is like, you know, the Napoleon, Caesar's, Hitler. Like, you know, history is filled with examples of societies that follow intolerance to the letter. But we don't follow Gandhi. We don't follow Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to the letter. You know, like, and then so the reason it was so important is because Leviticus is this book, like, is where, you know, the rule that you're not allowed to like be gay is. But I've done like sort of Bible studies or like looked at books that are about the Bible, and man, Leviticus is the one book everyone just skips over. Nobody knew how to like interpret it because everyone interpreted it as this like list of rules, and it was a big deal to me, like trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. So, anyways, religion has, you know, going back to your question, I mean, religion obviously has a huge deal with like why we've been this way towards gays. I think it goes back to Leviticus. I think it goes back to those rules. Like, yeah, it's the best answer I can get.
So
that was my favorite thing. Yeah.
I am going to reread that section, and I suggest all listeners obviously buy the book, read the book, but to emphasis on that section too, because that part where you're reading the Quran, it's in prison, right?
It's in prison, and I never read it before. Yeah, it's remarkable. It's beautiful. I'm not gonna lie.
I agree. Yeah.
The only thing that was really that was like hard to read was that every time instead of saying God, it would say Allah, and you're just like, why did they do that? Why don't you just change to the word God? Like, I
Yeah.
get why people don't want to read it, but it's beautiful. It's fine. Like, it's a great book. It like talks. It's very no different than reading. Yeah. Anyways, it's no different than reading like the Psalms or something.
Yeah. So I just want to venture into this question that I mean, probably neither of us can answer, but
Yeah.
it's huge enough to be worth like at least bringing up. Maybe people who are smarter than us can answer it. Maybe you can answer it. Why is it so much easier to be intolerant than tolerant? And why is it so much easier to follow people who are intolerant than people who are tolerant?
I don't know. The best thing, honestly, I don't know. It's about being better than somebody else. I think, like there's always that desire to want to be better than somebody else, and so intolerance is a hierarchy. I don't know, man. It definitely was going like. I just feel like it's so easy to be nice to people. Like, it's not that hard. Like, I just like grew up in an area where it was like just be nice, but like at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, but don't you think that being nice is different from being tolerant? To me, tolerance is more profound. Like, I can be nice to somebody by like holding the door open for them.
Yeah.
But it's much harder to be tolerant of somebody who has beliefs or lives a life that I can't relate to and that I maybe have like an immediate negative reaction to. Undoing that negative reaction and kind of like trying to take people for who they are and where they are, rather than creating, like you said, a hierarchy based on lifestyles and beliefs and values. That's hard work,
Yeah.
And you brought up meditation earlier. So I'm a meditator, and a big part of meditation is about, there's a lot of different practices, but one of the interesting ones related to this is there's a style of meditation where the whole purpose is you're trying to find the seat of yourself. Where exactly does your self, or some people might call it a soul, where is it? And so you like close your eyes and you literally search your body. You like scan your body, like where is the fundamental me? And you do it for long enough and you realize that there's nothing there.
Okay.
That there's no fundamental me, right? And that's an illusion, right?
Okay.
And when Buddhism talks about eliminating the ego, that's what they mean. It's realizing that you're not unique. You're not on any rung of the hierarchy. No one's on any rung of the hierarchy. We are more of a connected mesh of each other than we are singular special beings.
Yeah.
Right. And that leads to a tolerant attitude.
Yeah.
Right. Because then it's very difficult to say I'm better.
Yeah.
Or I'm worse once that happens. And so that to me is the closest I've ever gotten to. That's how I cultivate tolerance in my life. So, and I think, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. And, but I've heard people say that prayer does the same. I've heard Christians say that prayer can have a similar effect, but obviously something has gone horribly wrong, right? Because Christianity, like you said, is very often the driving force for intolerance in this country.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure which version of the book you had. Like, there's so many things that are taught about the Bible that are like that create the hierarchy or that create this unequalness. I don't know if you had the version that I think I put it back in was Frederick Douglass. Like, he writes this thing about like, as to the Christianity of Christ and the Christianity of this land, meaning America, I see the widest possible difference. What he's talking about is like, literally they're using the Bible to like condone slavery. And then Martin Luther King says the same thing. And then, I had this like chaplain in jail who like, I asked him why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. And his answer was, immorality, sexual immorality. And he said non-heterosexual immorality. And then he said accepting non-heterosexual immorality was the reason that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. And so if you learn, this is like a stupid Bible story that you learn that is teaching people to not accept gays. because he said not, accepting non-heterosexual immorality, and you're like, so we're going to be destroyed if we like are, and if not only if we're gay or if we accept gays, and then you have people who are taking this and literally using it to say the reason Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans is because of the gays, which is actually what people are saying.
What?
Bad religious people, like in 2007. That was probably, how long ago was that? 13 years. So yeah, but yeah, in 2007, people like Pat Robertson were saying, this is God's punishment for our like sin of allowing homosexuality, and New Orleans was a sinful place. And you're like, you guys have totally missed, like, kind of missed the Bible, and like, and using it to support basically white supremacy, white heterosexual supremacy, or and that's the problem, and that's where I think it kind of comes from. So I think that was why it's so important. Then so going to the book, like, why it's so important to attack all of this from a religious perspective. Like, I definitely see, like, I went through this religious period in my 20s, but because the academy was pretty religious, and so I like started exploring it, and then started going to church, and like when I was 22 and 23, and like kind of, but at that point I was like the type of person who researched a lot. I just gone through the academy, I just gone through a really good high school, and now I'm diving into the Bible. Right. I've been kind of taught it when I was younger. I would go to, like, I got confirmed and stuff, but it wasn't like really, I didn't really take it on too much. So now I'm now at like the height of my education process, and now I'm right after college, now exploring what is this thing called, what is the Bible, and doing it from an analytical perspective, a research perspective of like all the things I learned. So I think that was really important, and learning all of that was super important for understanding, like, I think we got this thing wrong, because people aren't acknowledging that this thing was written 3,500 years ago. Nobody's acknowledging that, like, we don't even know who wrote the New Testament books. If you ask somebody who goes to church and you ask them, like, what are the sources for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? They're like, what do you mean sources? Well, who wrote it? Like, somebody wrote this, right? People don't know, like, who wrote Genesis? When was it written? Was it written by Moses? Because it wasn't written by Moses. We don't know who wrote it. The written language written language didn't even come out until, like, I don't know, sometime like around when they actually started writing the Bible. So why is it so weird to understand it? Because they literally were using like a brand new language that people didn't even have written language, and now they're trying to write stuff down. So this is why it's like, and he made a covenant. Not because that's the way it happened and he made a covenant, but because, like, that's the most they had of their words. You think of the evolution of written language and language in general over the last 3,500 years. So much of the Bible is restricted to, they couldn't write, like, they wanted to go have sex, or like, they wanted to do this, or like, they just didn't have that language. And here we are restricting ourselves to it 33,000 years later to, I don't know. I don't want to say not eating pork, or like, but yeah, there are people doing those things because that was what they did 3,500 years ago. And now we're looking at, like, we have different healthcare now. I don't mean to say that against, like, Jewish people, as an example, like, we're restricting ourselves to this book that was like, 3,000 years ago. Yeah. Anyways, that's my piece.
So do you think that if more people read the Bible in the way that you read it when you were in your 20s, that the Bible would be a source for tolerance in the world today? Is the Bible intrinsically good in your opinion? And it's a misinterpretation.
When you understand it correctly, yeah. I think when you understand it correctly, it's kind of an interesting book. But like, I have this weird way of reading it that probably everyone's going to be like, that's blasphemy. But I think the way that the stories make sense are when you take God out of the picture. Like, this idea of, so this goes to Moses and Leviticus and the Exodus. It's like, when you read it from their perspective of, like, and God commanded, Moses to raise the seas, and you, like, if you read it that way, then you can completely miss what actually was going on. Because now they're finding, like, if you Google it, there's like an area that makes sense as to where this exodus might have happened, that when the right winds came, it actually like pushed the water back naturally. Like, you know, so I think when you understand the Bible as like it was written by people 3,000 years ago, and this was their best understanding of what was of the world, like creation. I think that was when I had to finally like, what the fuck is going on with this idea of creation? 3,000 years ago, they didn't even have a satellite. You know, they didn't have satellites. They didn't know we were a planet. They didn't even know we didn't even know that the world was round until like, you know, the year what? I don't know, when was that? 1500s or something, like, or thousands. I have to, Galileo Galilei. I have to go back and remember all these dates. You know, you're like
1600s. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometime after the Bible was written. I have to remember all my memory is bad when it comes to dates. But like, you have to remember, like, the book of Genesis was written at a time when the earth was flat and the sun revolved around it. This was the best understanding we had. And so it's like, was this, you know, is the story of creation, is that really how the earth was created? Or is that their best explanation for it at the time? And so you go, no, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's their best explanation. It's not the story of the creation of the world. It's like education. This is their education. This is what you're telling kids.
Yeah. So you talk about how, you know, there's a negative effect. Religion right now has a negative effect on the culture of the United States. It's making us less tolerant towards each other, right? And that sort of has a negative effect then on our political dialogue, on our public policies, all that. Do you see us making progress as a country in terms of our values and our culture? Are we progressing morally?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing right now is amazing. I think like the Black Lives Matter stuff is great. I think all the protests we're having, I like, as much as I hate Trump, I think he was like I think he's going to turn out to be a great thing for how bad he is. He is waking us up, you know, and I think it's like what I'm seeing is if like the entire country is against one person, which is kind of, I see it as like maybe the direction we're going. Like, I feel like this is a good thing that we're going through. I wish we didn't have to go through this process. I wish we could have just had Hillary 4 years ago. I would have felt great if we had done that. But it's obvious to me that we aren't there yet. Like, we weren't ready for just being good. Yeah. Which I hate all the things that are going on right now. I hate how many people are dying because of, you know, COVID-19. It's like the fact that we shouldn't have had to go through this, but we seem to have. And I think this goes to like, I gotta admit, I don't know if you remember the wave experiment from what I was writing, but there was this guy who did, you know, at a high school in the 1960s who did an experiment on fascism. And like, basically he showed with the baby boomer generation, holy crap, it works big time. Like, they weren't just, he went, I mean, imagine a club at a school going from 30 people to 200 in a couple of days. Like, that's insane. And it, like, he was attracting people who weren't even in his class.
Yeah, no.
And so it's so interesting that I met him when I was like in 4th grade. He came to talk to our class about a children's book, a different book, a children's book. But there I was like, can you tell us about the wave? And he didn't want to talk about it, you know? So like, so when you look at the baby boomer generation, like all the things were there for them to go down through this movement, to grasp it, to grasp Ronald Reaganism, and to like, the reason I think we're going through this right now is because that generation is retiring. They're retiring. So there's kind of a change of the guard. It's a new generation that's taking over, and like all that's why I think why we're having all of this like upheaval is because it's kind of like, you know, as that generation is retiring and leaving, and we're a more tolerant generation. I think each generation gets more tolerant than the one before it, and generally speaking. So, as our generation and generation, just ahead of us is taking over, we're starting to topple all these like monuments to intolerance, and literally, as we speak.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
So, listeners don't know that you and I you and I know each other because we coach water polo together, and on the pool deck we've had a lot of debates, and we don't see the world exactly the same way, but we've had amazing discussions exploring those differences. And so this is where I disagree with you, or in one place. I think that it's something about human beings that makes us prone towards intolerance and fascism. I think if you do that fascism experiment in a different format today, you'll see a similar result. And I want to ask you: do you think that within the progressive movement, right, the people who are leading these protests and who are participating in these protests, do you see elements of intolerance in progressives, or do you think that it's a real, like, it's a cultural progression that we are making away from intolerance?
Yeah, there was something what you were. Obviously, you could have that if you did that experiment now, because you have a lot of young people who are joining MAGA. MAGA is a totally fascist group, like the whole wearing the red hats. It's exactly the wave. Minus the differences. So here's the thing that I think we missed when it came to studying World War II. We were waiting for discipline, teamwork. What we weren't looking to was the substance. So when we think of like the people who are out there rallying in Oklahoma right now, we don't see them as the fascists because they're not doing discipline. They're not doing what, Hitler was having his people do, but Germans are very into discipline, so like they're a different group of people. So the fact that you have all these people who are wearing red hats and they're like, like looking like they're having fun and undisciplined doesn't change that the substance is the exact same. We were looking out for, I think this was a huge thing that I wrote that was really important, is that we were looking out for like the looks, armbands and marching and discipline and teamwork. So we almost are anti-teamwork. We're anti-coming together because we see that as the threat. Because the Germans were all united. At least in sort of our mindset is that, and it wasn't all the Germans. It was a subset of them, but
a lot of people were scared and were following for that reason,
A lot of people were scared. I mean, you had like, it's hard to make any sort of generalization because there's always like a percentage. There's a percentage of like, Nazis were maybe 30-something%. So anyways, but it's a good, they're a good example because we all generally know the story. But the thing that we just didn't, we were looking out for like what it should look like, discipline and teamwork. And so we're almost anti-teamwork. And I think that bends to why we kind of like intolerance, because if we see working together as like the threat. Anytime that we start talking about like, offering healthcare to people, like it should just be like, but we see that as a threat, like coming together and doing something like that. I think there are elements you could say there are elements of like intolerance on the left. True. I think both extremes. So I think it's really important not to see the spectrum as linear. There's like a theory that says it's the horseshoe. I think it's super important that you think of it that way because it makes way more sense, because then you can say like, oh yeah, if you go way too far to the left, you're basically very similar to the like far right. So I tend to call like, the far right would be fascism, far left would be communism, like Russia. The reality is, communist Russia and fascist Germany weren't really that different. They're basically, had really similar elements. And what we're finding now is that like a lot of, for lack of a better term, Bernie bros, like ended up going and being, Trump voters, because it was like, they wanted this authority. They just want somebody to be an authoritarian.
Yeah, they're looking for an intolerance candidate.
They're kind of looking for an intolerance candidate. It's not to say Bernie's intolerance, but I think they kind of latched onto that, and they tended to make him look like it.
So do you think that political moderates in the United States today are more tolerant than either members of the quote unquote far left or far right? I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so going to the horseshoe, for me, it's the Democrats just took over the middle. our political moderates tend to be too much to the right, and our Republicans are way up here.
Hmm.
Is the way I see it. So I would say our moderates, people who are like, you can't at this point to say like to say having to be fair and balanced means you have to have a Democratic and a Republican opinion. It's not true anymore.
Because it's also skewed.
Republicans are so far out there. It's like it's not even balanced anymore. Democrats aren't extreme. Like
So I'm not going to argue you on the ideological point, but I do want to bring up a practical political issue, right? Which is that if we've got enough people in the country that are skewed in the way that you're describing, then what do we like? Again, I'm not like you and I have different opinions about politics and political ideology, but from your worldview, what do we do about those other people? Do we just need to convert them by any means necessary? Do we wait for them to die? Do we, by however possible, mute their political voices? Or do we find some middle ground, which is maybe a little bit more to the right than you want it to be? Like, what do we do? We're talking about tens of millions of people in the so
well, it goes to kind of the purpose of the book, like, is that. Like, I mean, my goal here is to think, I don't know if I can speak to an entire country, but that's kind of the goal here is like, I think I have a pretty good platform in being there was like a fighter pilot who went to war and all, like, I think I have those, that was kind of, it's actually the goal of the book is like, can I wake you up? On the one, I mean, right now, I can barely even get my friends to read it. But, like, the idea here was to, it's hard. It took you a couple months to read it. I'm having just that much difficulty with my, Facebook friends or friends from home or high school friends. Like, it's hard to get anyone to read it because it's a book about being gay that's religious. Nobody wants to read, gays don't want to read that. That's
also what makes it so fascinating.
But it's so fascinating because it also has the ability to bring all these people together and to say like, hey, I'm not trying to say you guys are wrong, but hey, you kind of are wrong. Just like, but it's not your fault. Like, this is what.
Yeah, but that sounds so patronizing, Dave.
I don't know if it's going to work, but no, there is, the fact of the matter is there's a crash. Like, the people who, there's a movie called The Wave that kind of like follows the story a little bit. After like a week or two, the guy, basically the teacher, Ron Jones, I think if I remember right, he like put up he was gonna have a rally at the school. And he got everybody who joined the club to come to the rally. And then he put up, here's your leader. And it was like Hitler. And it devastated everybody. The Germans were devastated when they, especially, the Nazi people. They were devastated when they lost the war.
Yeah.
There's going to be some, like, a lot of sadness. I think when people wake up to, like, realities of Trump and the realities of not just Trump, but what we were doing with Bush. Like, just going after Trump, I don't think he's, like, really says the full story. I think you have to go back to Bush, and I think you have to go back to Reagan.
I agree with you that Bush is a far better representative of conservatism as most Americans understand it than Trump is. Trump has set conservatism on fire and then said that that's what it is, in my opinion.
It was still like Bush was still kind of fascism light. He was like medium fascism. Like, he wasn't, and again, you have to go through, it's not like in 2001, but by 2008, yeah, we were pretty bad. I mean, you can't like look at it. We went to 2 wars. You can't look at going to 2 wars without asking the question. So I think you have to go back and look at that. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some like, it's definitely going to be devastating. I don't see any way around it. Yeah.
So, I want to be respectful of your time, and then also I want to give people something to look forward to in reading the book. So I don't want to dive into everything that we can talk about, but I do want to say that there is some incredible insight into the way that the military works and especially your time in prison after going AWOL is fascinating.
Yeah.
Book. And sorry, what is that called again? The military prison?
It was the Marine Corps Brig, they call it. Brig.
Yeah.
Marine Corps Brig at Quantico.
Yeah, you were in solitary confinement for a long time. And this is just at the cusp, and you were in solitary. So, first you were reassigned and marginalized because you said that you were gay. You walked off, put in prison. And then this is all at the cusp of Don't Ask, Don't Tell being repealed. Just a fascinating time to get like a first person account of a gay man in the military. Yeah. And just some very interesting ruminations on the role of religion in the United States value system and the way we think about ourselves in our community. Also fascinating insights into the role of the military in civilian society in the United States, and how the culture of the military and general American culture are different and similar, and how they influence each other. So I'm going to put this out soon, and my vast audience is sure to buy your book soon. So it's called Tolerance: The Return of Christ by Kaiser. So quickly, can you give us some insight as sort of like a last closing thought on why Kaiser? Why? I mean, your name's Dave. Why are you going by a pen name?
To be honest, so I kind of always figured I would. There's a couple reasons. One, that easy answer is I have done some editing, so like and some changes to some of the stories, not really like pertinent, like things that like have a impact. But if you were to try and fact check it and you wanted to be like, oh, this didn't really happen exactly the way I tell the story, so Kaiser gets to be a character. He's a little better than me, is the way I would say it. And that's kind of the way, because I've also been able to edit the story. I've been able to edit him to make him a little better than me. But I gotta be honest, I think there's I think the other reason is like, I think it's hard for people who read it, who know me, to not want to debate me. Or like I had a friend who was reading it, who, because he knows it's my book, his first thing was, I disagree with a lot of it, which is okay. Yeah, okay, you're allowed to. I'm not saying you're not allowed to, but I think when there's a little bit more anonymity, I think when it gets beyond my friends or people who know me, I think it will be a little bit more powerful. And certainly there's things that are debatable, but I think it will be, I think once it gets beyond my circle of people that know me, I think it has the potential to be a little bit more powerful. Yeah. That's kind of the real reason why I'm not attaching my name to it. Because if I attach my name to it, the first thing people are going to do is like Google me or like look at me up on Twitter and then start throwing spears at me. And because that's just what we do right now. Look at my background and try and throw spears at me to discredit the entire story or whatever. That's just what we do. So I think there being a little bit of anonymity. My name is attached to it on the Amazon website, so it's not like totally anonymous, but I think it has potential to be more powerful coming from, if you're like somebody who doesn't know me, if you're in the middle of America and like, reading it, I think it'll speak to somebody way cooler.
And I see your point about a pen name giving you more creative freedom and creative license. I get that. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, and there's just things that when you're telling a story, you embellish stuff and you change things. I mean, I don't use any friends' names on purpose, for privacy, and there's other things, and there's things I took out. There's things that so I just don't want it to be that people like look into me and be like, you didn't, this little, this isn't right, or this happened, or you didn't talk about that, and try and use that to throw spears at me.
Okay. But just to be clear, it is, 98% factually correct. This happened.
Oh, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And also Kaiser's a cool name. Like I was happy to have that name. Like what, it's cool to have like Kaiser, and also because like, it wasn't like Kaiser, I'm German, but like the way people said it was like Kaiser.
No, it has the air of German authority.
I think it was just really funny. Like I think it's a funny name. Like because when you read Kaiser, you're going to think like, Kaiser. But then you read like this kid who's in the Air Force asking for like, where's the lavatory? And everyone's getting upset at him. Like, I think it's
They're like, Kaiser, it's over there, you idiot. You know?
yeah, like it's actually like, I think there's some humor in it that you aren't really, I don't know. I like it. I think it's way cooler it's way cooler book being read by, written by Kaiser rather than me. I'm boring.
No, well, after reading this book, it's obvious that you're not. But so, yeah.
Yeah, I would be curious. Like, I'm curious what we haven't talked a lot about, your thoughts on it so far. I'm curious to ask yours, opinions or thoughts on it and stuff. But wait, I'm really curious what happens when it gets outside of people who know me.
Yeah. I would love to talk to you, on the phone or something, or in person when we're allowed about just like my general thoughts on it.
Or just the next one. I like to hear, because I'm curious. Like, I mean, I feel like it should be a little bit, mind changing or belief changing, or I feel like, I don't know. We haven't talked a whole lot about like, the Last Supper, the paintings and stuff like that. Curious, like what, or like the whole Judas Iscariot stuff. Like, we haven't even gotten to that. Like, I'm curious, did I get it right? Are what are your thoughts on it? Did I get it wrong? Those types of stuff. That's what I'm curious.
For sure. Yeah. Let's talk some other time. And I was out right before this on the bay with Charlotte and Steph kayaking.
Oh,
we
cool.
kayaking an island and chilled, and they all said hi.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Tell me.
No, I told them what I was doing, and I like told them briefly the story, and they were just like, "What?"
Yeah, I told Charlotte once about it, and I think I told Steph a little bit about it too. Yeah, I've tried to, but when it's me telling it in person. It's not as dramatic. I think reading everything. I think reading it's got to be a neat experience. I've read it so many times it doesn't faze me. I would think reading it for the first time is definitely interesting, beyond interesting.
There's an intimacy to it, and the fact that it feels like a well-written journal, and it's telling such a crazy story.
Yeah,
I mean, that's to me the coolest part of it.
Yeah,
it is a journal from the inside of this wild tale. So yeah, may it spread the world. I will. Yeah, I'll be in touch, man, and I'll let you know once this thing goes up.
Okay, sounds good.
See you later, man.
Bye.